Please welcome Alex Nemeth Bikal to the stage.
G'day, good morning. My name is Alex. I am the head of the Enterprise Business Unit here in Australia. I've been with Amazon for a bit over 6 years. And allow me first of all to say thank you for making time to join us both in this session but also at the summit. Today's session is going to focus on what we call organisational capabilities. And we're focusing on organisational capabilities because about 3 years ago, we saw a tangible shift in the market from organisations really increasing their focus and their need to build new capabilities and establish new ways of working. And at Amazon, we talk about this concept of creating a future-ready business. And we see customers increasingly looking to do this to cater for increasing rates of disruption. And as they pursue these new capabilities, what we see is they're not only looking to cater for disruption, but ideally put themselves in a position where they can take advantage of disruption and even be the disruptor. So that's going to be the focus of the session today. But to start off, we feel it's relevant to look at some of the factors that are increasing the rate of disruption in local and global markets. This graph is from an Insight research report that was released last year. And what it does is it looks at the average tenure of an S&P 500 company. And it's kind of a tough time at the moment. And you look at this increasing rate of decline. So from the early 80s, it was about 36 years was the average tenure. Right now in 2019, it's 24 years. And it's forecasted to reduce to 12 years by 2027. The alarming factor is 50% of the S&P 500 is due to churn in the next 10 years. 3 factors are contributing to this increasing rate of decline. And they are advances in biotech, social media, and cloud computing. Interesting to note, cloud computing plays a major role in the other 2. And these 3 factors are fueling an increasingly buoyant startup community. And so never before have we seen the diversity of startups and the number of startups achieve scale in such a short period of time. Now, the challenge for traditional businesses working in an environment where we have this increasing number of startups is these startups don't have legacy. They don't have legacy tech, they don't have legacy process, structures, politics. Additionally, these organisations, more often than not, have a very customer-centric product creation and ideation process. And lastly, they have a culture of rapid iteration and innovation. And so the challenge for people working in markets where these startups are arriving, in both B2B and B2C markets, they are redefining customer experience. They're raising the bar and shifting the playing field. And the challenge is these new customer experiences very quickly become the customer expectation by which you are judged. We really started noticing this shift about 3 years ago. And the way we noticed this shift was the change in customer conversations that we were having. So historically, a lot of our conversations were quite tech-orientated and they focused on cost. 3 years ago, we saw this shift, and it wasn't overnight, but it was quite rapid. This shift in the dialogue that we were having with customers moved to what we call business-centric or business value subjects. And across a range of industries, here in Australia, we saw 3 consistent themes. There was staff productivity. How do I get more from my staff? How do I get greater output? And when we look at staff productivity, it's not just teams such as developers. We saw a range of conversations, including call centres, field teams in mining, logistics, and it was a common theme. What we also saw was organisations have a significant focus on increasing operational resilience and security. And lastly, this concept of agility. How do you help me cater for the disruption that is either occurring or coming, but how do you help me be the disruptor? And so we saw this shift from these traditional cost and tech conversations into business value discussions. And during this time, we saw a small number of customers move significantly faster. And this prompted us to start looking at why. Why was there a small number of customers that were really moving away from the mass market? And so we started to scratch, and what we noticed was capital allocation was tangibly different. Now this is kind of a management consulting 101. When you're working with an organisation who's struggling to change or implement strategy, one of the first things you do is you look at the strategic priorities and the allocation of capital. And so we did tangibly notice that the organisations that were moving faster had clearly defined and greater allocation of capital to their transformation and cloud programs. But what we saw and what we hypothesised over was this was a lagging indicator. This was not the root cause as to why they were moving faster. And so that prompted us to do some more scratching and more investigation. Now, we are very lucky, we're very privileged here in Australia. We've been operating for nearly 7 years. We have over 100,000 active customers across a huge range of industries, and our professional services organisation has done hundreds of engagements, and our partner ecosystem has done thousands of engagements. And so we have quite a significant ecosystem and body of work from which we can start exploring these themes. And so as we went through these organisations moving faster, what we found was there was 5 reoccurring themes, 5 capabilities that were present in organisations that were achieving more and achieving it faster. And they were leadership, understanding the role of leadership, skills as a priority, looking at cloud as an enabler to security, not a challenge, modes of operation, having clearly defined ways that they were going to run applications within their business, including what were the capabilities and controls associated with that. And I'm going to come back a little and provide a little bit more detail on that. And then data, and seeing data as a strategic priority, not just in technology, but within the business. And so when we look at this concept of these themes and these capabilities, one of the things we did was we started to triangulate our observations. And so we started looking at the leading companies that were moving fastest in Asia Pacific, and then we looked at leading companies globally, such as Capital One in America. And what we found through this process of triangulation was that these themes continued to be validated as the core that drove speed and outcomes. Full transparency, potentially career limiting, these themes and capabilities are agnostic. They're not specific to Amazon, and I'd suggest that they actually will work with any cloud provider. We probably have a preference that we have a fairly good cloud platform at Amazon, but it's agnostic, and I state that very clearly. If we look at modes of operation for a minute, and I just want to unpick this and just define it now, because it's really important, because this is an area where we have a lot of customers struggle to define. We look at modes of operation really in 2 key themes. We look at enterprise ops and we look at DevOps. Enterprise ops is really focused on your legacy apps, your COTS apps, your packaged apps. And what we're looking to do with these applications is to drive greater performance and resiliency and cost improvement. These apps, more often than not, run your business and are critical, but they don't differentiate your business. They're not creating competitive advantage in the marketplace. These applications, what we look at is really 2 ways to cater for enterprise ops. First of all, managed ops. And managed ops is really the process of leveraging a third party that provides a management framework out of the box, whether that be Amazon Managed Services, so we have a function that we're going to talk through today, whether it be SAP and some of their managed services, whether it be a systems integrator or partner. But the process of looking at a set of standards in regards to how you can run your applications and your operations out of the box. What this allows you to do is to minimise the capabilities that you must build in your business. The second part of enterprise ops is cloud ops. And this is the same concept in regards to these are still the same set of applications, but cloud ops looks at building the capability in your business. And so what we see as you build the capabilities in your business, there's an increase in requirement in capabilities that you must establish within your organisation. Enterprise ops usually has a change frequency that is measured in months and quarters, with a strong focus on performance, resilience and cost. The other side of enterprise ops is what we call DevOps. And now the challenge is you ask a lot of people or 100 people what is the definition of DevOps, and you get 100 different views. We have a really simple view of DevOps at Amazon. You build it, you run it. And so DevOps is the mode of operation that really focuses on high-value business applications. Applications that will provide you tangible competitive advantage in the market, applications where you are either building them from the ground up or you have access to the full code stack, and they usually have a fairly rapid change velocity. So we're measuring in hours and days. So these are the concepts of modes of operation. Now, the advantage of being able to define and understand this at the start is really twofold. First of all, it allows you to focus on the controls and the capabilities you're going to build versus those that you're going to leverage. What it also does is it helps with what we call workload placement. And so we work with a lot of organisations and we see a consistent question, which is, how do I run my applications? How do I determine the operating model for all the variety of applications I have? And when you establish your modes of operations at the start, it provides you with a clear guide. I'll give you an example. And this is one from a customer we did at the end of last year. Once we'd defined the modes of operation that we're going to establish, and you can do 2 modes, 3 modes, there's no hard and fast rule, but you define it at the start. As they went through their application landscape, it allowed them to ask a series of really simple questions. Was it an application that ran the business, or was it an application that provided competitive advantage? Did it differentiate them in the market? Was it a COTS or a packaged application, or was it an application that they were building? What was the change frequency within that workload or that application? And what were the capabilities that they had internally to run the application in different modes of operation? And through 4 or 5 questions, what we found is really quickly, with a high level of accuracy, we could determine across their application landscape where applications should be migrated to. So let's unpick the model just a little bit more. Organisations that are moving faster and achieving greater outcomes have 3 key themes that we see from leadership. First of all, there's an understanding of the difference between management that is really focused on establishing and maintaining the status quo versus leadership, which is focused on driving change. And in organisations that are moving faster, what we see is there's usually one or a small group of executives that assume the role of leadership. And it's quite defining across all our organisations that we work with. The second thing we see from this leadership function is great clarity of purpose. They have a great understanding and communication of why that business must change. And what that allows them to do is to take the business on the journey. And the business needs to go on the journey, and it needs to be from the board all the way through to the grassroots technical teams. A really good example I like to reference is the work we did with National Australia Bank before they launched their transformation program. We spent a number of quarters with their board, with their leadership team, both here in Australia and in our head office in Seattle with our executives, working with that executive group and working with that stakeholder group in regards to understanding why and understanding transformation and really validating the need for them to move. And as the bank came out of that, what they had was from the board through the leadership team, a real baseline of agreement as to the need to move and why they needed to move. And once you understand the need to move, what we see then is organisations that focus on skills be able to move faster. Skills we look at from our observations in regards to these organisations that are moving comes in three areas. First of all, the skills element itself. And there's 2 basic elements here. One is training your people and thinking about training your people at a multi-dimensional level. So what is the knowledge or awareness that a business unit MD needs to have versus a business unit GM versus your technical leaders and your hardcore developers and coders? And thinking about doing a training program that provides awareness throughout the organisation. What these companies also do is they think very deliberately around attracting top talent both locally and globally. And so they really look at an external communications program to start talking about what a great place it is to work in that organisation. But the challenge is training people and hiring people is not a short-term fix. It's more of a medium-term play. And it's really important when you're driving change and transformation that you move into action as quickly as possible. And so organisations moving fastest consistently will leverage external organisations, whether that be AWS, whether it be our partners. They're bringing in subject matter experts, people that are highly skilled with experience to enable them to move into action really quickly. What that allows is, first of all, for them to move. It accelerates the learning process, so their teams are learning in the classroom and then they're doing, and the doing process accelerates the learning curve. But what it also does is it allows them to ensure that they're doing it right and they're doing it safe and secure. And then what happens is something magic, and this is one of my favourite parts of the job. We see change occur, and it's change within people. What happens is barriers are broken down and individuals and teams reimagine the art of the possible. And when you see the art of the possible occurring, you get this groundswell of appetite to do more. And when you get this groundswell of appetite to do more, what you're now doing is driving cultural change from the centre. And what you're building is the foundations of new capabilities that allow you to operate and work in new ways. This process then, as you lean into it, becomes self-propelling and accelerates in momentum. To now talk about security and also modes of operation in their business, please join me in welcoming Steve Day, Executive General Manager of National Australia Bank. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Alex. Good morning, everyone. I think most of you in this room will know NAB. In fact, probably about 20% of you here are actually customers. But what you probably don't know is we're 160 years old. We have over 400 products. We have over 2,000 applications that we have to run. They're written in 30 different programming languages, and yes, one of those is still COBOL. It's a complex environment. And yet, 95% of our customers' transactions now occur on digital channels. So our customers are expecting us to act like born-in-the-cloud providers. They're expecting us to provide the same experience as an Uber or an Amazon or any of these companies that provide world-class digital experiences. So how do we do that securely? We have to look after your money. Now, traditionally, in such a complex environment, the way we handled governance and security was to develop a culture of no. Right? I want to do something new. Well, the default position is no until you've jumped through 100 hoops to prove why what you're doing is safe and secure for our customers. That doesn't work in the digital world. We need a completely different solution if we are going to be fast and agile, if we're going to be relevant. And certainly, we cannot afford to have our systems down at any time now. A few years ago, it didn't matter if our services were down from midnight to 6 a.m. for maintenance. Now it does, because there's a lot of people using it. So how do we address that? Security is really important to us. It's probably it's not even probably, it is the most important thing about running our business. We are a bank. So what we needed to do was to create a governance regime that worked really well inside a digital world. And that's where we developed CAST. CAST stands for Cloud Adoption Standards and Techniques. And that has allowed us to actually programmatically define how we run our workloads in the cloud. And it's actually given us an opportunity to uplift the governance of our application significantly, so we know exactly before we make any decision on what we're going to do whether it will or will not comply, and we can remove that culture of the default answer being no. The default question now is, does it comply with CAST? Now, because we've moved our infrastructure to the cloud, we now have infrastructure as code. We can also have compliance as code once you have that. So we've been able to take most of the controls within CAST and automate them. And that's what it looks like. We call it invisible compliance. Why? Because our developers don't need to actually run through every one of the compliance checks that we do in a manual way anymore. When they fire up a new instance, you can see there we've got Lambda actually seeing that and triggering a whole bunch of compliance controls that take over and have a look at what that developer's doing without the developer having to do anything, and work out whether they're doing it in a safe way, whether they're developing things in compliance with our controls. It'll actually even look at their code and look for vulnerabilities and look for malicious intent within that code. It'll look for things like whether or not we've tagged the environment for what it is, what it's supposed to be doing, who it belongs to, whether it's running all of the right antivirus, whether there's security controls in place, whether our DevOps principles are being met, whether our operational controls, whether it's defined to be patched and backed up at a certain time, whether there's business continuity in place, is it running over multiple availability zones and multiple clouds. All of that is checked and ticked off without the developer having to look at it. That's sort of really taken us into a new area and allowed us to do to implement our cloud workloads in a really agile way, but also safely. We also apply it at different levels. So if you're experimenting with something, we don't force particular controls on you. They gradually tear up. So for instance, yes, if you're creating an environment to do an experiment, it still has to be tagged. We still have to know what it's for. We still have to know that it's actually not there doing some bad thing, that it's actually part of a formal experiment. But we don't do things like ensure that you're running in multiple availability zones, for instance. That's not required for an experiment. And as we go through the different stages of development, those controls gradually ratchet up. So by the time you're going into production, 100% of the controls are checked and in place. But as part of the blueprint, we also wanted to look at the modes of operation. And NAB has taken a very similar approach to the one Alex defined earlier. We have, I mentioned before, over 2,000 applications. About 90% of those are packaged or COTS applications. They don't require a DevOps approach. In fact, in our definition of DevOps, you can't run it because we didn't write it. We don't hold the source code. So the whole you build it, you run it doesn't apply. And it's just not appropriate to take a really expensive developer and have them patch a packaged app in the middle of the night. So what do we do about that? Well, we've gone onto the 2 model. Alex referred to 3. We've gone on to the first one, which was the managed cloud environment, and we use a service from Amazon called AMS, Amazon Managed Services, really inspirational name. And that allows us to put those packaged apps in an environment and run them in a tight governance model, but to do it at pace. And the reason we can do it at pace is because AMS is triggered via APIs. Everything that you want to do, all of the operations that you typically want to do on a workload is done via an API. So if you want to do a change, there's no form to fill in, there's no change board, there's no approvals that need to go through. Well, there are, but they are all automated. So as a service owner of that particular environment, you would go into our ITSM and you would say, I want to perform this change. An API call would go across to Amazon. Most of the changes they have are what's called a constrained change, which means they're automated. That change would be run. It'll be automatically tested. If the test fails, an incident will be automatically opened. If an incident's automatically opened, it will come back into our ITSM and open the incidents there. So we don't have all of that swivel chair. We can see everything in our ITSM that Amazon is doing on our behalf. And most of what they're doing on our behalf is automated anyway. So it gives us this ability to run your traditional, I wouldn't say ITIL, but your traditional waterfall type management techniques, but in a really fast and sophisticated way. Last month we ran 5,000 changes across 120 applications that we have running in AMS. 5,000 changes is a lot in 1 month, over 100 apps, right? Normally, I was surprised. I was like, wow, 5,000 changes, how can that be? These are packaged apps. We're not going in and doing major changes on them. Why? And when I dug into it, it turned out that those changes were always happening. We just weren't recording them. They were things like tiny tweaks on this, or a move here, or a change in parameter on this, that never used to be recorded. People would just go in and do them because that was deemed as operations or part of an incident or whatever. Now we've got the governance in place that we can actually see that on this date, at this time, this particular user made this particular change which created this particular outcome and moved our CMDB to a new release based on that. All in an automated sense. So it's a very fast and very agile way of doing traditional operations. When we looked at running or getting onto this service, it was daunting, right? We have these thousands of applications. How do we get on there? And AMS actually brought a lot of benefits. Because it is such a constrained environment with not a lot of options, it didn't allow our service owners to be snowflakes. They were sort of forced into a very constrained best practice that Amazon had already developed. And so we actually took that and we used that to create this 30 and 50 process. And we said, what we're going to actually try and do is move 30 of our applications in 50 days. And we're going to push them all into this AMS environment because all of these applications are packaged or COTS. And that gave us a really consistent way to migrate, and it gave us a platform in order to create very consistent processes and tools to do that migration. And it was pretty tough in the first half of that, in the first 25 days or so. We weren't getting a lot of progress. But then as we enabled a lot of the platforms, got the tools in place, got the processes working, we actually started to migrate at pace. And we've now been able to build on that and go from our 50 applications up to 120. And we will continue to go on until we have 35% of those 2,000 applications on the cloud by next year. So how does that help in terms of presenting information back to the business, letting everyone, giving everyone a better feeling that everything is working? Well, now we have 100% of everything that's happening in our environment logged in ServiceNow and the reporting that generates. That's our ITSM, ServiceNow. We have a service mapping. So because our infrastructure is code, ServiceNow can actually go out and explore what our services look like. And they can bring back in the entire service map of what our services look like, and we can now see, we've never had this ability, we can now see the hundreds of servers and features and capabilities within the cloud and within our data centers that make up a service. That's now logged in our CMDB, and every night that CMDB is updated. So we don't have that problem anymore of, what does this server do? Oh, let's turn it off and see what breaks. We know now exactly what will break. So thank you. Alex, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Really appreciate you joining us today. I am going to call Seattle tomorrow morning and talk about Amazon Managed Services as probably being the least creative name we have. Engineers are great on creative feedback. What I will say is the frictionless compliance that enables your developers is really, it's bar raising, it's inspirational, and it's one of the things we've loved seeing, where we look at cloud as an enabler for the bank to become more safe and more secure, but also enabling people to be more productive. Just brilliant. Thank you for the opportunity to continue working on that as well. So thanks so much. continuing the theme of enterprise ops and looking at how we drive greater performance, greater resilience within this core of our business. I have the great privilege to welcome to the stage Paul Marriott. He's the SVP of the SAP Digital Core offering, and he's going to talk about how SAP approaches this concept of enterprise ops and driving improvement at the core. Please join me in welcoming Paul.
Okay, thank you. Morning. Thank you, Alex, for this opportunity to present. You may be sat there wondering why is SAP on the stage at an AWS keynote. Fundamentally, what I want to talk about is how we develop software, the services that we're using from AWS, and this concept of enterprise ops. SAP really looks for technologies in the marketplace to enable us to do two things. We take that technology and we build it into our packaged applications, the COTS that were referred to earlier. So we're constantly innovating in our own SaaS applications in terms of embedding new technologies into that business process. So you can take advantage of that technology in the context of the industry and the process that you're operating within. And we also recognize that we need to make that available through a faster innovation cycle through platform services. So for example, our cloud platform services right here in Sydney run out of the AWS data center. And that's how we're providing the fast innovation cycle to our customers alongside this enterprise ops in terms of the process innovation. Now, SAP for 40 years has been doing process automation. For any SAP customers in the room, 1992 is a historic day in our history. We released a packaged application which is affectionately referred to as R3. Maybe I get a show of hands who knows what I'm talking about. Okay, a good half of the room. And what that really enabled us to do in this era of process automation was bring significant amounts of automation to a packaged application around finance, sales, distribution, and all of those business areas. And it established SAP, obviously, as a leader in the ERP and supply chain businesses. Now, what we've seen, and it's been talked about, is that over sort of the course of the early 2000s through to 2010, what we had to do with our business processes was digitize them. And we've seen a lot of organizations digitize that business process. How do I create an end-to-end customer experience? How do you create that for your customers to provide better value to the customer, but also then improve the productivity of your organizations? And that digitization happened through IoT and RFID and a whole bunch of technologies that allowed us to bring data into the business process and get further automation. I've seen organizations get a 10, 15, 20% improvement in productivity, which has a massive benefit to the cost structure of their organization in terms of then how they look at new ways of doing business and investing into new areas. Now, the way that I believe we're in now is in this next degree of automation, which for SAP is really, really important. We're talking a lot about things like AI and machine learning. These types of services are absolutely provided through AWS. And we take these machine learning services and we're embedding that into the business process. And we see that there's probably another 50% of manual steps in a process that can be automated. And we can apply that to asset maintenance type business processes. We can apply it to cash flow and financial processes. We can apply it to transportation management, warehousing, and a whole areas of our packaged applications in terms of providing that further optimization. And what that ultimately does is provides you the ability to get more automated within the package and then free up the time from those mundane operational tasks and invest in the higher value tasks that support your customer. So this is what SAP's been doing, obviously, for 40 years. Now, our partnership with AWS is 10 years in. So we became a customer of Amazon 10 years ago, and we've been building on that ever since. A couple of data points for you in terms of how we leverage their services. So on the right-hand side of the screen there, you see a number of our cloud assets. So you see Concur. This is a network-based travel and expense application. 90% of the capacity of that application, in terms of how it's delivered to our customers, runs on AWS. If you look at other services like our own cloud analytics, so the analytics services that we provide around our own business process and our own applications. 70% plus of that application runs on AWS, leveraging the AWS services. The one at the bottom is an interesting one. It's getting a lot of commentary in the market at the moment, given the amount we paid for the acquisition. But Qualtrics is a customer experience cloud capability. Amazon is a customer of Qualtrics. The survey forms that you're filling out today are powered by Qualtrics. And again, we enable the delivery of that application through AWS technology. So suffice to say, there's an incredible partnership technologically in terms of how we've delivered SAP solutions to market on the AWS platform. And as I mentioned earlier, right here in Sydney, we run our own innovation, our own cloud services on AWS out of the Sydney data center. So the partnership is strong. Ultimately, from an SAP perspective, as I described earlier, and in this enterprise ops world, we're really trying to achieve two things. How do we give you better business process in a packaged way, recognizing that you need to innovate there, but at a slower pace? But how do we combine that then with a DevOps and cloud platform environment where you can link that to faster innovation, but continually link that to business scenarios and scenarios that truly deliver ROI back to your organization? This is not easy to do, in my opinion. We can stand up here and say that, this is a great vision, but the question you will be asking is, well, okay, the how. One of the things that we've built with AWS is what we call an industry-approved journey map. So, for example, if you're in the industrial manufacturing sector, we, SAP, have the best practice around the end-to-end processes in that industry that we believe will drive the future of your organization. We then have a blueprint that is defined on AWS where we leverage the services into that process layer for that industry. And we actually bring then another third party into that, which is the system integrator. So, for example, globally, Accenture, in certain industries, we've been very specific about how SAP with AWS and Accenture creates a blueprint for an industry that allows you to then leverage that process innovation in your organization. So we released these blueprints at the beginning of this year for certain industries. We have our global customer conference next week in Sapphire. You will see next week the expansion of those approved industry journeys with AWS, along with the system integration community, to help you know how to move forward across both your process and then your DevOps innovation. So two things really from an SAP perspective. As I mentioned, and I use this as an example more than anything, over that period of automation that we saw earlier, we've released a set of applications that we call S4 HANA, so the R3 from 92 became S4. We have about 3,000 customers globally now that are live and running S4. And those applications can obviously run on the AWS platform, and that can happen in two ways. We have a set of cloud services. We call it the HANA Enterprise Cloud, where it's a set of SAP-managed services where you can leverage our services on top of AWS to deliver that, or you can do it natively straight off the AWS platform. Both options available. And then we have something called the SAP Cloud Platform, and this is really that more agile innovation set of business services that runs off AWS to then further extend those packaged applications and capabilities we have in S4. Now, we've done this with tons of customers. We have about a 75% global overlap in install base of customers, and that runs into hundreds of thousands of customers. For example, I represent the whole of Asia Pacific, Japan. In March, we closed a really significant piece of business with a South Korean distributor in the utilities sector, which is doing its full S4 transformation on SAP's cloud services on AWS. I think you heard from Lion this morning in the keynote, a really good story around how AWS and SAP and S4 have been used together to drive innovation. And you see a whole load more here. In Asia, Sumitomo up in Japan, L&T Infotech in India. Many customers are now using the services from SAP and AWS together to drive that outcome. My offer to you is really simple. I don't think that we show up enough together in your organizations. And my commitment to you with Alex is that we show up together. Because I think together, if we define that roadmap around your process innovation, as well as how you use those innovation technologies you've been hearing about yesterday and today and tomorrow in the core AWS platform, that's really when you can drive and define a really strategic roadmap around how your organization moves forward. So that's our commitment to you. Quick plug, we have after lunch, we'll be having a round table where we'll get into a lot more detail about the journey maps and the partnership and how we can work together. But I really hope that we can take that opportunity with all of you as we go forward from today, working in partnership, which is with a fantastic partner, AWS. So thank you for the opportunity, Alex, and over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much. Cheers. That's great. Thank you, Paul. And I look at the opportunity to work with these mission-critical applications with partners such as Accenture, leveraging the AWS platform to drive really tangible business improvement and business outcomes. Paul, first of all, we value you as a customer, so thank you so much. And we also deeply value the partnership as well. So thanks for joining us today. DevOps. So as we move through the modes of operation, and we've looked at 2 examples of enterprise ops, I now have the great privilege to introduce an organisation and a person that I believe is really leading the way in regards to both thinking about and implementing the DevOps framework. Please join me in welcoming Damian Cronin, the CTO of Fairfax.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Just want to take you on a bit of a journey, a transformation of a legacy business. Don't want to pick on Steve with the NAB, it's 160 years old. The Herald is 186 years old. And in 1836, what is now New Zealand was part of New South Wales. Was 70 years away from being a nation state when Fairfax was formed. So when we talk about legacy and heritage, there's a lot that goes into protecting these brands going forward. The change I'm going to talk you through is predicated on a really simple maxim. Tight on the outcome, loose on how we get there. Tight on and being opinionated about where we're going and the direction in which we're setting, but loose to fathom and embrace the creativity and the flexibility that we need to find out how we arrive at that destination. So, all good stories need a little bit of context. Media has 0 barriers to entry. That cliff face up there is disruption. That's 80 years of revenue for the newspaper industry, and in the space of 10 years, it has gone to next to, well, 0. And what you can see is that the disruptors have entered the market. If you think that your industry is not going to suffer that fate, then I think you need to rethink the likelihood of that. That is going to happen to each and every industry. The reason why it's happened to media first is media has no barriers to entry. So your disruption may not be as rapid or pronounced as the media sector, but it is coming. People throw around the words innovation and disruption like they're synonymous. So I just want to go through a quick reset on how I think about these 2 words. Every company innovates. The most static, stable, cardigan-wearing organisation can innovate. It innovates at the individual level, the team level, the business unit level, and that's just improving the way in which we get things done. But doing innovation in and of itself will not save you from the cliff face of disruption. What you're looking for is what are the profoundly different things that are going to occur for you that are going to reframe and reorient how you service your customers, open up new markets, new business models, new revenue opportunities. And that's disruption. That's a much harder thing to get a large organisation reoriented and focused on. But that is where the promises of things like DevOps and Agile transformation come to the fore, because you don't need to boil the ocean, you don't need to move the whole organisation, you just need to surgically identify the areas that are going to provide you that competitive basis. And that was the challenge that was posed to us as part of our change. And this does take alignment. Alex spoke about leadership and strategic, the board and senior leadership being on board with this direction. Nothing like an existential threat of that cliff face to challenge an organisation to go, all right, we need to think differently here. We need to place some bets that are sizable. We can't just innovate our way out of this. We can't unscramble the egg. How do we think profoundly differently about the business we're running? And so we were set a task of doing 3 things by the board. Not one of these things, not 2 of these things, all 3. We needed consumer-focused products. We needed to deliver upon a leaner cost base. The rivers of gold are long gone. And we need to provide technology, platforms, and processes that will continue to allow us to do those things well and fast and agile and responsive to business needs and exploit those opportunities as they exist. And you might say, that's great, what a wonderful luxury, but I've got a massive technical debt, right? We got systems. We weren't immune to that. Being the aged entity and large-scale enterprise that we are, we had our fair share of that. We had mountains of technical debt, change cycles measured in months. We were doing some quasi-agile / waterfall management reporting. Decision-making was diffuse and abstract in the organisation. Teams weren't empowered. So we needed to create new user experience to support our growing subscriber proposition and a platform that our journalists can use. And we need to do that in an organisation that was not susceptible to or not embracing necessarily rapid change. That was the challenge. And you might say, why are we doing this? And you go, well, okay, well, Fairfax, legacy publisher, its competition's ABC or News Limited or The Guardian. And that's true, but that's not really where our eyes on the football. Our eyes on the football from the fact that our competitor in this space in 5 or 10 years probably hasn't yet been created, or if they are created, they're a relatively small and nimble organisation. For me to start a bank, I need capital, I need regulatory approval, I need a banking license. There are barriers to those entries. If I can write good copy, build an audience, I can go set up a WordPress.org account, I can go and grow that audience, I can sign up for Google DFP, and instantly I have myself a media business. It's as simple as that. That's our competition. That's where our eyes need to be focused in terms of what we're competing with. So here's a way to think about this. A simple model which brings together some of the components that were the basis on which we executed. We actually went and separated and found ourselves next to a burger joint in Surrey Hills, grabbed a small team, got physically out of the building, away from the white blood cells of organisations that and had the authority and the direction to bring a team together to focus on a greenfields style approach for those areas where we wanted to compete, the areas where we need that flexibility and growth. So we started with the end in mind. That's always a good place to start. And we said, well, we want to have change cycles that are on demand and multiple times per day. So we embraced open source. We lent into things like Kubernetes, cluster compute. We're no longer dealing with managing instances in EC2. That's for the cluster to manage. We're just issuing jobs to the cluster for it to organize and run those workloads. We embraced open architecture. We looked at microservices and the API patterns we wanted to adopt. Because we could no longer deal with the monolithic setup that we currently have, we needed to break out of that. So that was the basis of the change. And a natural ally to that setup is making the most of cloud. So if you have teams that are managing capacity and thinking about forward planning on disk storage on the SAN, then those are not value-adding activities. There's someone in Amazon in Seattle who loves doing that and a team that's well-suited to optimizing for that. That's their job. I want my team focused on making the most of the idea that the cloud is a utility. Just like you turn on tap on the water, water's going to come out. No one gives too much thought, or is it the Prospect Reservoir, or is it Warragamba that's flowing through? So that's the basis on which we operate. So when we push a change now, a bot fires up in Slack, says, right, let me go and instantiate a production-like environment for you, fires up containers based upon the dependencies for that service, runs the automated test suite, unit tests, acceptance tests, end-to-end tests, and either gives a thumbs up or a thumbs down back to the operator in Slack, and then we have the choice to deploy. Zero manual user involvement. Automated from the ground up using DevOps agile principles. And once we get that right, once we have those patterns in place, then our ability to scale at will is always an option. So if we, major news events like Christchurch, I've worked a career in technology, and the newsroom is always very busy during major news alerts, and technology usually mirrors that because you often see spikes of 2, 3, 4 times your traffic volumes. On that day, there was next to no activity going on in technology. People were head down and working away as usual because the platform was able to scale and respond using the benefits of cloud and leaning into those technologies through the automation that we had in place via those DevOps practices. And that's a profoundly powerful aspect of getting this set of technologies right. But I guess, there's a common expression, technology is easy, it's the people equation that's hard, and that is true. You cannot, in itself, just use these technologies without accepting that the people and the team's structures the teams need to be rethought in terms of how you organise them to undertake their work. Small autonomous teams, teams that should be compact. The philosophy here is 95% of the team's workload, their backlog, can be addressed by skills within the team. If you have teams reaching out and reaching into other people's backlogs, then what you have is effectively gridlock. You've got wait time. So using lean principles, you want to minimize wait time. You want to have a team autonomous and self-contained and able to be empowered to do the things they need to do. Flat structures, clear accountabilities. Anyone here who's ever had anyone say to them that Agile is not about accountability, we'll be done when we're done, you can't rush Agile, we'll plan sprint to sprint. Show of hands if you've come across that philosophy. Yes, that is right here, right now. Agile is about accountability. It's about having a plan, but accepting that the plan may change. And the trade-off here is the team gets to elect how it wants to do its work. In exchange, you have transparency around how that work is being done. And that invites you to have sensible questions. A team should know why it wants to move a date or whether a scope has changed. So we're very data-driven on this. So quick example, this is what we call a glide path for those that enjoy flying. So the red line is our understanding of the scope. So it's not unusual in custom software projects that your understanding of the problem when you get into the work expands. So what you see is a gently increasing scope, but we want to hit a certain date. So when date and scope meet, that is the ideal glide path. That is the line in blue. That is the trajectory at which the team needs to operate in order to get the job done. And what we have in orange is the team's actual progress against that. And that flat line there is Christmas, right? So what you've got sitting above on a 60-inch TV screen above each and every team is instant transparency around what is happening in that team. And if you get RAG statuses today and 3-page project reports, and the penultimate paragraph is where the project manager is buried in the idea that the whole thing's screwed. That is done away with. What this is an invitation to have a conversation with your team around how things are going. No one gets to bring their own facts to the table. There might be a good reason for why these things are or are not healthy at a project level, but the debate is no longer about, well, you changed the scope and you're not working hard enough. It's about, right, how do we solve this, guys? What do you need from me as a stakeholder to help you unblock that? So the people component is massive. So the reality of doing this is that you get more work done in a shorter time frame. But really, the intangible benefit for me that I always lean upon is that you get more productive and happier people as a result of operating this way. So in 12 months, we've been able to turn around and greenfield a 186-year-old business. We've re-platformed the publishing platform that 500 journalists use and put into market new AFR, Herald, and Age propositions that we think, with the underlying platform, allow us to compete and provide that competitive advantage. We don't want to be the recipient of that disruption. We want to be our own disruptor. And that has been the basis in which we're operating. So if there's one thing I can leave you with today, it's the idea that that disruption is going to happen. There'll be that billion-dollar unicorn that comes along and is going to eat your lunch. This change can occur, but you need to start somewhere. You need to start getting that wheel turning, and adopting some of these practices is a good first start. So I'll hand back to Alex, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Damien.
No worries.
Thanks so much. If I listen to the feedback from global conferences that Fairfax has spoken at, I think it's validated that what you're doing is absolutely world class. I have also had the opportunity to work with Damien for a number of years, and he's kind of the leading indicator of change for us, because where Damien turns up, we know change is going to happen fairly rapidly. For those of you who don't know, Damien built the stand service here in Australia, and you go, that's cool. What I thought was really cool is he did it in about 10 months with 10 people, and I thought that was incredible. So thank you so much, Damien, and love the opportunity to keep working with you. So the last component of the capabilities blueprint is looking at data, and it's looking at some of the challenges traditional businesses that we're working with are finding in regards to prioritising data, but then also conversely, the organisations that are moving fast, what are the principles that they're adopting? And so please join with me in welcoming Namja, who's one of the technical leaders within Amazon Web Services here in Australia.
Cool. Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Namja, and I'm a technology leader with AWS. And I've been working at AWS for about 6 years now. So at Amazon, we have a strong heritage as a data-driven company and a long history of running our business with data at scale for over 20 years. In my many interactions with customers, I consistently hear from my customers that they want to gain more value from the data. And this value that our customers are seeking falls into these 3 key areas. The first one is business efficiency. So our customers want deeper insights into their core business to make improvements. So this is about supply chain optimization or better forecasting, customer churn analysis, just to name a few. Secondly, organizations want to improve customer experience with data and provide their customers with more relevant recommendations and personalization. And thirdly, customers want to use data to explore new business areas. And this one is really important because this is about innovation. Customers want to use data to make key decisions about where to invest the money. So Netflix and House of Cards, going back a few years, but it's actually a really famous example of creating new business streams. So this is a fairly well-known use case where when Netflix commissioned and decided to buy 2 seasons of House of Cards, they actually bought the 2 seasons of the show for $100 million without actually seeing any of the episodes because they used data and analytics to make that decision. So organizations have the desire and the intent to get better value from their data. But what I also consistently see is that our customers are facing some common challenges. The first challenge is what I would call the economics of big data. Too often, our customers are constrained by high cost of compute, storage, licensing, or any combination thereof. But for our customers to succeed in this space, they need to be able to store data at scale and process it at scale and at really low cost. And secondly, organizations have made really large investments in technology platforms that have perhaps become a little bit too rigid for modern data use cases. A traditional data platform may be okay with dealing with some structured data sets, but the reality of the digital business is that a significant growth is actually coming from unstructured and semi-structured sources. And with data decentralized, locked in silos, in applications across many business divisions, data is often difficult to access. So the opportunity for our customers to combine the data for deeper insights across their organizational-wide businesses is severely limited. So to compound those issues even further, our customers are getting demands from their customers and their businesses. So to compound this further, our customers are actually coming under a lot of strain from their own customers to support new business use cases like artificial intelligence, and they all want it in real time. And on top of that, the data volumes today are only increasing at an exponential rate, coming from more sources, and more apps and users want to access that data. By the way, I spent all my animation budget on that slide, so no more animation from here onwards. So we see that these challenges are only going to get bigger unless our customers can address these with the right solution. And today, our customers that are finding success in this space are adopting what we call a modern data architecture in the cloud. So modern data architecture is a set of guiding principles which allows our customers to build data solutions rapidly without all of the limitations and challenges that I described. So in economics, modern data architecture enables our customers to build and process data at scale, hence removing that first really significant barrier to entry for their data solution, which is cost. Secondly, in technology, modern data architecture provides our customers with really wide choice of tools and services, many of which are open source, to solve virtually any data problem. So with significant costs now removed, and with a multitude of tools for our customers to solve any data problem, customers can now centralize the data in a data solution, perhaps in a data lake, and make it easy for their business to access that data, but making sure that the security and governance is very tight. So what does a modern data architecture solution actually look like? So let me build one out for you. OK, so whenever I'm designing a data solution, this is the mental model that I always start with, the ingest, store, process, analyze pipeline. And then in a modern data architecture, any solution with modern data architecture has the storage at the centerpiece of the solution. And on AWS, this is the simple storage service, or S3 for short. OK, so S3 allows our customers to centralize their data for easier access and also for deeper insights. So customers can store virtually any volume of data and any data type. And that's really important. It's secure, it's durable, it provides our customers with data sovereignty, and you can store data in S3 for a low cost of 2.5 cents, US cents per gig per month. So in the ingestion layer, modern data architecture provides our customers with the capability to ingest data from any source. And that's really important. And you can ingest data from transactional systems like SAP, IoT devices, doing database extracts, and also this can be done in batch or in streaming in real time. But the key here is that customers should be able to ingest data from any source. And moving on to the process analyze, with modern data architecture, customers can have a choice, a multitude of choice to solve virtually any data problem. Whether it be open source data frameworks like Spark or Hadoop, or all of the machine learning frameworks that we provide, such as TensorFlow, MXNet, Caffe, and many, many more. So at Amazon, security is job zero. So that means that any service that we provide in the data space is going to be delivered with really strong security. Any data that's stored in S3 is going to be encrypted at rest with our key management service, and any data that flows through end-to-end through this pipeline is going to be encrypted in transit. And with modern data architecture, all of these services are decoupled, which means that they can be scaled independently, but more importantly, you can pick and choose just the services that you need in order to deliver on your business outcome. So here's a few customer highlights. And Epic Games is a really, really interesting one, just because of its sheer scale. They have over 200 million. And in fact, the last time I read, they're nearing 250 million users around the world. And they've experienced 100x growth in just a 12-month. So with the modern data architecture solution, so Epic Games were able to scale the data solution with the growth of their business. So today, they store over 14 petabytes of data in S3, use a multitude of AWS services to process that data, which is growing at 2 petabytes per month. And most importantly, Epic Games are able to respond to their customers at speed with new features. So another customer, Atlassian, are running a data platform on AWS, and they're actually going to be talking about their data platform called Socrates at a breakout session tomorrow afternoon. But don't worry too much if you missed that or any other sessions this week, as we will be recording them and make them available to you online at a later date. So to wrap up, so data is becoming more and more important, and the capability to use it effectively will become, or actually is, a major strategic advantage. Cloud is a game changer, and it has enabled our customers like Epic Games to really scale their solution to the growth of their business. When you start on your cloud journey, I want to leave you with one advice. Don't get too myopic on the technology or the tool, but really focus on your business outcome. One of my favorite quotes from Jeff Bezos is, "Good intentions are not enough, you need mechanisms." So create mechanisms in your organizations as foundations or accelerators in adopting the right modern data architecture solution. At Amazon, we have a mechanism in data, and we call it 3x3x30, where we take 3 use cases with 3 data sets, and we commit to delivering on a business outcome in 30 days. And with that, thank you, and I'll hand you back to Alex.
Thanks, Namja. Thanks so much. Brilliant. Thanks, Namja. Really important. I can tell you firsthand, some of those gaming companies are brilliant. I have 3 young daughters. All of them are quite happy when they're running their devices. And when you dig into it, what these companies do at scale and at real time, they're analysing your average screen time. And based on your average screen time, they're determining when is the best time to prompt you with some sort of gift or up level or upgrade that increases your screen time. What they also do is they look at when is the most engaged moment of your use to actually make you buy something. And I know this because I once got a bill for $350 from my 8-year-old daughter whilst we were at lunch, and she was happily playing on the phone. So I think they do a fantastic job. Slight problem on my end, probably more around parenting. To finish off, yes, I am one of those parents at lunch, quality time. To finish off, a couple of things. I'm going to leave you with 2 concepts. What next? Would love your feedback on our observations in regards to this capabilities blueprint. So first of all, whether you email me, whether you get in touch with your Amazon contact, we value feedback. Feedback is a gift, and so if you think it's complete rubbish, I would love to know. If you think it's relevant, I would probably more love to know, but no, feedback is a gift. So please let us know if this resonates with what's happening in your business. And the second one is, if there's items within this blueprint that you would like us to talk to you about, let us come in. We will work with it, we'll share, and we'll look at it together and see how we can help you. And the last one I want to look at is this concept of antibodies. And so rather than a call to action of what we must do, I'm going to talk about what we need to avoid, because these are the consistent antibodies we see that stop progress. So first of all, this concept of no bold objectives. We see lots of intent in organisations and they get stuck in analysis paralysis. And it links to leadership, but what organisations need to do is they need to put a stake in the ground, they need to draw a line. And it doesn't have to be multi-year, it could be as simple as saying something like NAB, where we're going to do a 30 and 50. Or something similar to what Namja said, that said to accelerate our modern data architecture, we're going to do a 3x3x30. So have some objectives, ideally bold. Don't overcomplicate it. One of my passions is to talking about multi-cloud. After working in this industry for over 6 years, working with regional customers, global customers, I can tell you multi-cloud 50-50 doesn't work. Cloud is hard enough looking at one. Pick one and get it right. Once you have it right with one, then think through what else you need. But please don't overcomplicate it. On the concept of overcomplicating, do not, for my own sanity, look at infrastructure coordination. I can remember years ago, and apologies for anyone in the room, service mesh. It doesn't work. What it does is it lowers everything to the lowest common denominator and extracts the value of cloud. Don't overbake it. Number 2 is leverage partners. Skill sets are an incredibly important currency in this digital economy, and they help you move fast, they help you move safe and secure. Leverage partners. It is critical. Organisations that don't and say we're going to do everything in-house, they don't move. Poor funding. Think about this, because funding and bold objectives are linked. And so when you make statements and you take ownership and you talk about the things you are going to do, you will get funding and demand funding. And then the last one is business alignment, because at the end of the day, it's not about building tech. It's not even about using Amazon. What it's about doing is delivering value to the business, whether that be reducing cost, whether that be improving customer experience, whether that be ensuring the longevity and sustainability of the organisation. Let's ensure that everything we do aligns to business. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for your attendance and thanks for listening.